Welcome to the first of these shows on project management. This has actually been put together for a range of different students that I have who are most likely studying a Cert 4 in project management or a diploma in project management, but also I teach some people who are doing a particular unit of project management, such as risk management, and it's also for anyone. So please, if you have anyone who's interested in project management, direct them this way. The shows are free, and I'm happy to actually provide any additional information if required. This first show is basically just looking at some project management basics before getting into the particular areas of project management, such as scoping, time, quality, cost. I should say too, welcome to Horsfield Bay. I'll probably do some of the shows here. It's not a bad view, even though we have got some pretty horrible weather brewing around me at the moment. You can probably see nice blue sky out there at the moment, but I'm also surrounded by some pretty heavy clouds, so hopefully I'm going to get this done before it starts to rain. And also say hello to the producer and director of the show, Dog Pirate. He's actually standing right below my feet because he has to be involved in everything. Say goodbye to him. And we'll get things started. So the first thing I wanted to cover in this basics program is that project management isn't consistent, and that's probably going to irritate a lot of project managers who say, well, we follow a certain methodology such as Prince 2, etc., and we have a very consistent system. Well, it's not exactly true from my experience, and I think that causes a lot of people getting into project management, particularly students, a great deal of trouble because they read a certain textbook that says something, pick up another textbook and it says something else, and the terms change, which basically for me means you've got to be flexible. I've had the fortune to work across a large range of different industries, and I found even though the project principles are the same, they use different terms, they use variations of different methodologies. So if you're flexible, you're open to learning a particular approach, then you can fit into basically any organisation, any industry with your project management skills. And that's the way these shows will follow, in the sense that I'm not going to sort of dictate one particular way of doing project management. Hopefully I'm going to expose you to a range of different ways, and you figure out where that fits into the sort of industry or types of projects that you'll be involved in. Okay, so what is a project? I've got a nice definition here on the screen, which basically says that a project is a start to finish series of logically sequenced activities or tasks designed to achieve a unique product or service with a contracted time, cost and quality parameters. Very broad, very simple definition, but pretty important though to actually understand that doing a particular job, doing a particular task isn't a project unless it has all of those components. Logically sequenced set of activities or tasks. It must have time, cost, quality, and quality is quite often the one that people don't think about, and we'll cover that in a later show. And it doesn't matter what type of project. You could be involved in a project such as this, which is a construction site, with everyone standing around not doing much, or you could be involved in more of a knowledge conceptual type of project. A lot of my projects now are in that sort of area where it's about ideas, it's about bringing ideas together, and quite often that will end up as a training program or as a written sort of policy or procedure, but it has all the same parameters as a construction project, and I still use the same principles. When putting together a video, either for communication purposes or for training purposes, still has the same principles as a construction project, an engineering project, a software project, or any type of project that you can think of. We still have that same definition applying. Just on methodology, you can search the internet if you want to, and I've provided some resources for this particular show which will demonstrate the fact that there are a range of different ways of approaching project management. And in project management they typically call that a methodology, which is a question I get a lot of, like, what is your methodology? Personally, my methodology in the past, and probably still is now, is more of a PMBOK type approach, but with variations in that, generally because that's what the client requires. And some people then talk about Prince 2, but also, even though this slide probably won't come up very well on the show, you can see that there are also many other types of methodologies. And one of the other ones that is fairly recent on the scene, I guess it's been around actually now for quite a few years, is Agile. Predominantly is more in software engineering, but is also branching itself out into other types of projects, and it uses a completely different approach. Please check out some of the website references that I've provided, so you can understand those. Some of you may need to go down one of those tracks, particularly Prince 2, PMBOK, or Agile, because they're probably the three main ones. And some organisations will definitely be using that approach or that methodology in their organisation. They all have individual training programs associated with them, and that methodology is very much about the structure that they follow to actually get you from the start of a project to the end of a project. Let's not get too complicated though in this with project basics. I'm just going to use a very simple model, which is 4 sort of stages to project management. The first one being concept, and this is where we actually have the idea for the project and or concept, and this is where typically we actually form up some of the boundaries and the basics of what this project may entail, and that then goes to some sort of project management governance committee, or a manager, or the CEO. Basically goes to somebody who actually has to approve that scope or that concept, which then takes us into the planning phase. Planning is the next part, or scheduling, as this diagram says, interchangeable terms, and this is where we actually work out in detail how this project will begin and go right through to the actual project closure. The next phase obviously is once we've actually have a plan, and it will have things like a budget and a schedule, then that is then approved by whoever the client is, whether that's an internal client or external client, and we will then move into the third phase, which is implementation or progress. And in other words, basically this is where the project has started, and we are moving through that schedule with that budget, with the specifications, moving towards an end point where we will say that we have achieved our project objectives, or we have delivered what we said we would deliver as part of the project brief. So just to recap then, scoping takes us through the boundaries and sort of like a summary of what the project will entail. Planning gets us up to the point where we are basically ready to start and we have all the details required, and then actually progress implementation is basically where we're actually moving through the project phases. At some point obviously we reach the end and we've achieved our objectives and we've delivered the deliverables, then we actually have project closure, and this is the final stage where we wrap up various aspects of the project and we say that the project is now finished. And obviously each one of these phases we'll talk a lot more about in future shows. Very important concept to understand in this basics show is that all the way through those phases of the project we have 3 main aspects that we need to consider at all times. And there's a number of ways of looking at this too. If you check on Google, for example, you're going to see different triangles for project management, some of them including scheduling. I personally just like this 3 sort of triangle, sometimes referred to as the golden triangle of project management, which basically is just time, cost, quality. And what this triangle is showing is the interrelationships between those 3 aspects, in that they pull and push on each other. So in the scoping phase and the planning and the implementation and even the closure, they have an effect on each other. If you change one, you change the others. For example, if the project actually before the project proceeds, if we go into scoping, a client says, look, this is the amount of money that I have for this project, let's say it's $100,000, then that's going to dictate somewhere in your project a certain element of how much time it will take you to do. And that's also impacted because to actually cover that sort of amount of money, then we're going to need a certain amount of time to achieve whatever the objective is, and that time is also impacted by the resources you need, for example, people. Now obviously the cost affects the time, and it's also going to affect the quality. If that 100,000 isn't actually all that much money, considering whatever the objective of that project is, then we're going to probably have to settle for a lower quality. Now if the client wants really high quality, it's going to affect then the cost, and maybe 100,000 will not get them the high quality. They may need to chip in more money. As soon as we have more money and higher quality, we're probably going to increase our time to actually achieve the same result. So you can think of many different examples here, but if you examine any project around you at any point, you'll notice the effects, if you think about it, of time, cost and quality. For example, if we're moving through a project and there is a budget cut, in other words, there is less money now than we really need, we're going to have to cut back on some things. And one thing that's obviously going to affect is the quality. Maybe we're going to have to settle for less quality materials or items in our project. Maybe we're going to have to reduce some of the staffing for the project. And that will then also affect time, because time is probably going to have to be compressed a little, because time equals money. Again, if we start moving through a project and let's just say we change now the time, in other words, we have to finish this quicker than we expected, the most likely effect will be that costs will go up, because I'm going to have to throw more human resources in particular at the project. And the other effect could be, and it could go either way here, quality may drop because we're speeding things up and hence we're not paying enough attention to quality, or quality may have to also go up, but again we're going to have then an additional cost with that. Okay, so I think it's a really important thing. I'll probably refer to it later in later shows in regards to the fact that it's something you have to constantly think of, remember, monitor and check, because it's going to have a big impact on you. And those three things will change as you move through a project. The last real thing I want to cover at this point in Project Basics is project failure. Not a very positive thing to think about in this first show, but many projects fail. And in project terminology, project failure can be defined as a project that doesn't actually meet the specifications of the original scope. And there can be a million reasons why this may occur. And look, I could rattle off a great stack of them at this point, such as poor estimating, poor budget, not working out the schedule effectively, contractor problems, all of these things. And if you actually look at the research, the stats, basically the success rate of most projects, if you use that definition, in other words, the project I scoped out is the project I finished with, then you're looking at around about 10, 12, 15, you look at percentage of projects are successful, which means around about 90% of them are classed as not necessarily successful, and there's a large chunk of those that are outright failures. In other words, they don't even finish, or budget or time or quality blowouts are of a significant size. So it's worth considering at the start of your project management career, where do the major failures occur, and hence obviously these are areas we should target in our scoping and our planning. And you can go down a whole series of tracks here, but I want to point out probably the two that every project manager talks about, the two that generally speaking they probably don't do very well, or they don't cover off enough, and surprisingly, and these two areas are people and communication. If you don't have the correct people, and that can be your own internal people and also contractors and suppliers, then you're definitely going to have troubles in your project. People are difficult to control, people are difficult to understand, people are difficult to motivate and inspire to actually do what you want them to do. And hence this is a big issue for most project managers, and typically project management programs don't cover enough about human resource management or contractor management, and it's a downfall of a lot of projects. The second area is communication. The more complex the project, the more complex the communication, the more things go wrong. And communication, as we all know, is actually a very difficult skill, or a difficult process in project management. So this is another area you have to really keep a tight control on. Interestingly enough, communication is people. So it's really back to people again. So, just to finish off then today, just because I'm almost going to run out of film, how do we actually get started? Where does a project begin? There are a number of ways that a project can begin, but essentially a project has to have a purpose. There's a reason that we want to do something, a purpose, that then initiates a project management approach, such as project scoping, etc., or, as I showed you in that previous diagram, concept. So the key thing here is that it can sort of go down two tracks. One is essentially, we need to do this, let's get a project team together, let's initiate this project. The other way is a business case type approach, where I need to put forward to you, the client, justification why we should have this project and why we should carry this out, and the purpose of that obviously leads to some benefit. Simple terminology here is that cost-benefit analysis. In other words, this project's going to cost me this amount of money, but the benefits at the end of it, the deliverables, the objectives achieved, is going to equal this amount. Hence, this is worthwhile. This is why we should get a project started. So I'd like to leave things there, and in the next show I'm going to actually look at business case and what that actually means and what's involved. But I do want to leave you with the thought that business case always isn't required, and my experience is about half and half. Sometimes a business case is required to justify, but quite often the project's going to happen anyway. The project's already been deemed as required by a committee or a group or a CEO, and there's no business case from the project manager's point of view. There's no concern there for you. You basically just have to actually start scoping out the project and then start planning. So, I hope that was informative. Please leave any comments that you want at the email address that's provided. If you also have any questions, please ask.